Gen Z is the most connected generation in history. They have access to millions and millions of people at just the tap of a screen. Yet studies revealed that 61% of Gen Z reported feeling lonely, even when surrounded by friends and family. This is much more than just a fad. This is much more than just something that is happening in society. This is an epidemic.
Gen Z needs to be way more forthcoming about how lonely we are, because I am extremely freaking lonely. I am spending Saturday night alone again.
So what's causing it? And more importantly, how do we go about fixing it? We're constantly plugged in. We're constantly liking. We're constantly favoriting, commenting. How many times during the day do you like something, favorite something, comment on something, follow somebody, and it almost gets confused as if it's a real interaction? None of these interactions actually matter. None of these interactions actually are filling our social battery. And even when they do, think about all the people that like and comment on things that you do that are not really your real friends. A recent study from the American Psychological Association showed that people who are regulars on social media, which is almost our entire generation of Gen Z, are 2.5 more times likely to be lonely. It showed that social media doesn't reduce the feeling of loneliness, it almost amplifies it. Just imagine you're just on your phone, you're scrolling, you see your friends from high school that you haven't talked to in 10 years, and they're all hanging out together, and you're just in the room by yourself. Doesn't matter if you have friends, but you're just in the room by yourself and you instantly feel left out. Or think about when you see a millionaire and they're riding around in their Lamborghini and they're riding around in this or that, and they're doing this thing, and you feel left out because you're not doing it or you can't do it. So social media has been seen and shown to amplify these feelings of loneliness, these feelings of isolation, these feelings of inadequacy, and it creates a false sense of security in someone's social network. Because I have access to this person and this person and this person, and because I talked to Star Wars fan 63, the other day on Xbox Live, these are all my friends. And not to say you can't have friends that you make on Xbox Live, but you all get the point. Not everybody that you meet online is going to be your friend. And in fact, the vast majority of people that you meet online are not going to be actual friends to you. So it's a catch-22. It's like you have access to so many more people, so much more room for connection, so much more opportunity. But the results are showing us that we are not getting more connectivity. We're not getting more of the social battery recharge or just that meaningful interaction. We're not getting that just by being on social media. And in fact, just as I said, we're actually taking a look at things that are going on around us and we're feeling left out. Things that we wouldn't have known. I mean, our parents or our parents, when people hung out, I mean, maybe they might hear around town or something, if they live in a small town, that they saw these people hanging out. But we literally see them hanging out. We see what they did. If they're posting on their stories, we see the jokes they're having between each other. We see everything that happens in these situations. And not to say that we don't get dopamine from these apps. We do. We get them as soon as we get the like. We see it, we get excited, but it does not last. Dopamine is not meant to last a long period of time. Dopamine is what your brain creates in order for you to do something exciting. So it does not last a long time. And once that goes away, you don't have the same result of a meaningful interaction. So what we actually have is hyperconnectivity without true connectivity. So it's a lot harder to make connections when you are not mentally feeling well. Just take a look at the world that Gen Z is growing up in, especially my section of Gen Z. It's the tail end of millennial, late Gen Z or early Gen Z, tail end of millennial. And we are in a society where we had the swine flu. We had the recession in 2008. And Gen Z is also dealing with economic uncertainty, climate change, and a bunch of political things that are going on throughout the world that affect their mental health on a basis. And while everybody is saying these days, listen, you must watch your mental health, go to therapy, do this, do that, the access to therapy has improved, but it has not gotten to a point where it's easy for everybody to get therapy. It's not at the point that it needs to be yet. So that's something that Gen Z has been struggling with. And without that help, A CDC reports that anxiety and depression among Gen Z has gone up 25% in the last decade. Maybe you felt it too. It's called your 20s. The overwhelming stress, the idea that you can't keep up with what's going on, the idea that you're not in control, and whatever you do, you end up not being able to accomplish what you set out to accomplish. Speaking of accomplishments, Gen Z is full of accomplishments. We live in a generation where people are literally 18, 19 years old. They're already millionaires. You live in a generation where people are 29 years old and they're living with their parents and they are still not able to get to a point where they're completely self-sufficient.
It is okay to live with your parents in 2024. It's infuriating that people are shamed that they're not moving out of their parents' house yet, when it takes literally 30 years to fully pay off your mortgage, let alone rent. It's just not economically feasible in 2024, especially for Gen Z.
Most people cannot afford to live by themselves. So just picture that lack of independence that Gen Z has, and then they compare themselves to their peers who are doctors and lawyers and business owners and everything under the sun. And just imagine if you haven't gotten to that point in your life yet. Well, now we have access to see literally what everybody else is doing in our age group. And we compare ourselves to everybody in our age group. And it's very easy to feel like you're not measuring up. You're not on track. And psychologists are calling this the comparison trap. It's the constant exposure to ideal lifestyles that you really wish that you could live. And you see it all the time and you don't have it. You're never going to be happy if you're constantly comparing yourself to someone who has just a little bit more, if not a lot more, in one area than you do.
Hey, looking good, Turner.
Dinkelberg.
And it's a vicious cycle. It leads to burnout, it leads to embarrassment, it leads to not sharing this with your friends, which means that you're not connecting the same way you would with your friends as if you were open and honest and said, I don't think I'm here. Or maybe your friend is farther ahead of you in a certain area and you don't want to mention it because you don't want them to think that you're jealous of them. So this overwhelming pressure and overwhelming exhaustion ends up leading to loneliness. And loneliness is affecting everyone, but it's especially affecting Gen Z men. We've seen all the things about the incel movement, the red pill, blue pill, I don't know, red fish, blue fish. I don't know what the pills are.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
But there's people taking all types of pills in these new movements that we have, and we just have a generation of young men who don't feel like they've had a fair shot. They don't feel like they'll ever have a chance to build a life that would allow them to attract a woman. They don't feel like they can have friends. And what essentially happens is they get together, they build these groups where they feel finally heard. They finally feel like there's other people that feel like them, and they have a community that they belong to, sometimes for the first time in their entire life. And some of the biggest hurdles here come from the lack of ability and the discouragement from society and maybe their parents from emotionally expressing themselves. I mean, I know we've all heard it, the typical don't cry, don't express yourself, don't let them see weakness. If you're dating somebody, don't let them see you look weak.
Don't get a lawyer, do the whole bid. Be a man.
And I'm sure these things were said in an effort to strengthen young men, to give them courage, to give them tools to be able to protect themselves and protect their families. But essentially what it's done is emotionally stunt almost an entire generation. And you add that in to the fact that they have literal access to other people that are just as stunted. And once they get into these groups, why listen to any other perspective? Why listen to any other opinion? Why would I listen to another opinion when everybody here is finally validating my feelings for the first time in my life? This is what we're running into these days. And when they log off, guess what? There's nothing around them. There's nothing around them. And that, my friends, is how you end up being lonely. So how many of you have seen shows like Friends or shows where the cast would meet in a coffee shop every week or every day? Every time you see them, they're in a neutral space that they get to hang out. That's what you call a third space. And Gen Z's third space has become the internet.
リンクスタート
Now we have access to a ton of third spaces. We have coffee shops still, obviously. We have all kinds of things, but what do you see when you go into a coffee shop or when you go into these places? Everybody's on their laptop. Everybody's on their phone. There is not some place that Gen Z uniformly goes to have a third place where they can meet with their friends and they can have these things. And in order to get those things at this point, you have to be very intentional. You have to be extremely intentional, because if not, you're going to continue to speed by life and not be able to go someplace and just simply hang out. Those things are not here in the same way they were before. So establishing a third place is a great way to bring back some of that human connection, some of that real life connection. So take up something like golf, take up something like basketball, go out for a book club, find something that you can connect with fellow folks, whether it be Gen Z or whatever. Find something where you can find other people who are interested in the same thing that you are. And this time, skip the Zoom meeting. Do it in person and just see how it ends up working out for you. So how do you even get to your third space? Well, you got to touch grass. You got to touch grass. If you don't touch grass, you're never going to be outside. You're never going to form connections. You're going to be inside learning about who knows what, trying to figure out how you can build connections, when the easiest way to do it is actually go outside, touch grass, interact with other people, go out and form connections with people out in the real world. And when you're hanging out with your friends, don't just say, okay, we're going to the Starbucks, so let's take pictures. We're going to a restaurant, so let's take pictures. We're going to a mountain to hike, let's take pictures. Just enjoy the moment. Just enjoy the moment. Be present when you're doing things. And I'm telling you, that'll give you a much, much more relaxing, much more sound state of being. And you're going to form that much deeper of a connection with whoever you're hanging out with. And while you're hanging out, have the deep conversations. It shows that people who have those conversations about their mental health are 30% less likely to suffer from anxiety and depression and loneliness. If you go and have these conversations with people and actually have conversations deeper than, what was the score of the game yesterday, or what was this, or something that's surface level, next time when you're hanging out with somebody, when you're hanging out with your best friend, talk about what's going on in your life, because no one talks about that. And that's why everybody feels so close to each other, yet so distant. Remember, folks, seeking help and seeking assistance in times of need is a strength, not a weakness. So the crisis that Gen Z is facing is very serious, but it's not hopeless. We're still in our 20s. We got 80 plus years left on this world. Hopefully some billionaire comes out with something that allows us to extend our life until 120. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but hopefully we got a long time left on this planet. So it is not hopeless. We are not out of it yet. So we've got to understand the root causes. We've got things like hyperconnectivity without connections. We've got mental health struggles, and we've got societal pressures. All these things can be fixed by just simply being present in the moment, finding things to do that you like to do, and being expressive when you're talking to friends and family, sharing your emotions, sharing your feelings. You can turn your life around. There is nothing wrong with wherever you are right now, but there is a ton of opportunity that you can take advantage of to become the best version of yourself. And if you're the best version of yourself, you will be a lot easier to hang out with, and no one will be lonely. If everybody's the best version of themselves, no one will be lonely, because everyone will love hanging out with each other. Now I want to hear from you. Have you experienced this loneliness during this crisis, especially during the, paramedic, or you know what I mean by that. But have you experienced this loneliness? And if you have, what have you put into place to move past it? And if you got some tips that really helped you out, drop it down in the comments. And if you find this video helpful, check out this video on why everybody is wrong about Gen Z.